Do you find it hard to explain to friends and family what you now do? Are you wasting valuable time by attempting to figure out challenges on your own? We have created a community for ex-corporate people running their own business who want to live a life they love whilst giving back to their community. This is the Build, Live, Give show. We bring you first-hand experiences of guests going through many of the struggles you face each and every day. We get real with no corporate BS. And now your host, Paul Higgins.
Welcome to the Build, Live, Give show, episode number 24. I'm Paul Higgins and I'm your show host. And today I'm very excited to have Tanya Gray from B Business. Tanya actually started her career working for some of the biggest global companies, and she had a very interesting background because she worked in both operations and then she went across into sales, and she absolutely really loved it. But with the backing of her husband, she actually started her own sales consulting business because she wanted to go out and make a bigger impact on companies and actually help people be a lot more comfortable with selling. And she just shares some awesome wisdom around how to sell in the modern world. She's got some great tips, and I really recommend you grabbing a pen and paper and listening to this fantastic episode. So what I'll do now is hand you over to Tanya Gray from B Business. But before we dive into today's show, leaving corporate to run your own business can be extremely hard and lonely. You start off in a euphoric state, and at some point you look at your cash flow and start to doubt your abilities. What you learn in corporate doesn't always translate, and you are bombarded every day with new challenges. Learning something yourself is okay, but it can be both timely and costly. Friends and family want to help, but they don't have the specific experiences you need. This is why we created the Build, Live, Give community, a free community with hundreds of people just like you, answering questions and sharing real experiences, and definitely no spam. This, coupled with weekly interviews on hot topics, will help you expedite success. Search for the Build, Live, Give group in Facebook and answer the 3 questions to gain access. Anyway, enough from me. Now it's time to hand you over to one of the BLG members to hear their wonderful journey. Welcome, Tanya Gray from B Business to the Build, Live, Give show. So, Tanya, I know a lot about you and I've really enjoyed working with you, but the BLG listeners don't know a lot about you and your backstory. So why don't we start with you sharing a bit of your backstory?
Okay, Paul, thanks for that. Look, my background has always been in sales. I actually started my very first job in sales at 14, and my career developed through the corporates like Lion Nathan, Carter Holt Harvey, through new business development, account management, channel selling, and national sales management. But I suppose my thing about how I came to where I am today is my passion for selling. Paul, one of the things that I really, really struggle with is selling is considered a bit of a 4-letter word, and particularly in Australia. Yet we all understand that selling and sales is critical to any business success, but yet the way people are selling is giving salespeople a bad reputation. I believe this comes from a little bit of the American training that we've done. So my passion in life, the reason that I do what I do today, is to help salespeople sell without that pressure and without that cheesy tricks that some of those other training people suggest, so that I can participate and help grow sales for businesses in Australia.
Excellent. Well, we'll certainly learn more about that as the show continues, but just let listeners know a little bit about you outside of work. So something that your family or friends would know, but the BLG listeners wouldn't be aware of.
Oh, that's a tough question. What would most people wouldn't know about me unless they were good friends and family, as I absolutely struggle with my own company. And I think this is a bit of a fallback of being a salesperson that's always talking to people and enjoying the company of clients. And I suppose that's when it was the biggest problem for me is I became hospitalised with my first pregnancy. I was in the hospital on bed rest for 7.5 weeks. And I'm truly grateful that my lovely friends and family got together and put a roster together, because having my own company for 7.5 weeks would have been very destructive. So that's a little secret. Don't tell too many people.
Okay, well, look, we'll tell a couple of thousand a month.
Thanks.
It won't be many.
You're so kind.
Yeah. So, you had a brilliant career with Lion Nathan, as you said, Carter Holt Harvey, some great companies. What was, if anything, was holding you back from those, large corporates to going into your own business?
Holding me back from the corporates, I suppose it was a level of experience. I think I felt that I needed some more experience under my belt. And so I went through a bit of a growth strategy and made sure that I had a wide variety of experiences. I did a lot of different types of selling and then managed large teams. The largest team I managed was 32 people before I was headhunted into consulting. So what was holding me back was really, I just had to be the right time.
Great. And what were some of the fears when you took that brave step and started your own business? What were some of the key fears, if you can remember back to then? What were they?
The memory hasn't quite gone yet, but yeah. So 5 years ago, I remember the day I turned up and I said to my husband, you know what? I'm not going to go back to work. I'm going to do what I absolutely love to do, and I'm going to do it for myself. And I can remember the anxiety that came up for me then. And what it was about is what I'm going to offer going to be good enough? Do people want to come out and buy it? Am I going to fall on my face? Do I think I'm better than I really am? All of those, what if scenarios came out, which, that's pretty normal. But the other fear I had is I had to create things like websites and run my own IT and set up my own email addresses and just those small things that when you're working for corporates, they do it all for you. So it was interesting when I first had a couple of days of challenges around the IT space. I thought, I'm not sure I've done the right thing here, but I haven't looked back.
Yeah, and look, I think it's becoming a lot easier these days. I know, I've been out just a little bit longer than that, and certainly, it was the same. Like, Xero wasn't really around then. You had really clunky MyOp that wasn't a cloud, and a lot of the cloud products that you've got now just wasn't there, and it was really difficult. And like a website, I think, quotes of $10,000, $15,000 for a pretty ordinary website, where I'm so glad that we've progressed so much further now and it is a lot easier to get started. But the flip side is there's a lot more noise as well. So it's hard to differentiate yourself. And if you think back to some of the help that you got, so who sort of supported you to help you grow your business as you left and started to scale it?
As people always say, and it is so true, it's your surrounding influence that will make your biggest differences. And I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by some pretty incredible business owners, and one of them was my husband. He runs a business building property portfolios for people, and he had struggled in the beginning, like many small businesses did, and worked through the problems and resolved it. So I'd watched him go through that, saw that he survived it and got better and better, and now has a thriving business. So he would just jolly me along at times, but also offer some help. My father is an extraordinarily successful businessman. He supported me. And then there was Matt Catling from Your Future Now. And what Matt did was help me get clear on what my purpose was, what I was trying to achieve, where my business positioned itself, and what value I was going to bring. And they also referred me to my very first client. I'd been literally opened my business 3 days before and I had my first client. So I was very privileged.
Excellent. So if we sort of fast forward to now, when you walk into a sales meeting or maybe into a networking party, what do you tell people that you do? So someone says, oh, hi, Tanya. So what do you do? How do you describe that or answer that?
The old elevator speech at the networking event. What I tend to say is that the clients that work with me are from medium to large businesses, and they're generally seeking to grow their sales revenue by double figures within 12 months. So they've got quite ambitious directions. The way my program works is it develops their sales processes and their people. It repeatedly converts more leads faster.
Great. And who are, so medium to large businesses, as you said. So sort of tell me a little bit more about who your ideal client is.
My ideal client works in the B2B selling space. They generally have a small sales team. So we work between normally 4 to 20 salespeople, and that could be a blend of salespeople, customer service, sometimes delivery and logistics people because they're front-facing with the customers as well. But always business to business. And what we try to do is change their position in the marketplace. Have I got time to tell a story?
Yeah, please do.
Great, I like telling stories. I'm working with a business who sells tool parts into wholesalers and retail outlets, which are then utilised by builders. They're selling B2B, but to a B2C environment. And it's interesting how the retailers work with those suppliers. What we've done is we've come in and changed that whole workspace environment and been able to change the language and the delivery that they're having to the marketplace, so much so that I've had 3 of their competitors ring and to find out if it was me who was doing the training, because they're now become more commercial. Small businesses won't survive if they don't do that in today's world. And this is one of the companies that's adopted the practices to do so. They've got 20 people in the field.
Fantastic. And look, with all your experience and in helping people improve their sales as you do, what are some of the key things that you go to? So if you had to give 3 pieces of advice on, look, you should be doing these 3 things or focusing on these 3 things in selling, what would you say?
Well, the first thing I'd say is don't burn time. Look, selling is so important, but I watch so many people in their process burn sales time. So what I mean by that is make sure you are only seeing the people that pre-qualify. Mm-hmm. A lot of customers will just turn up and do meetings, and the only thing we can't get more of is time. So if we've burnt time seeing the wrong people, then we've probably missed out an opportunity to seeing the right one. So that would be the first thing. Get very targeted, get a good understanding of your value proposition, and make sure you don't burn time. The second thing is I would focus on your messaging. A lot of customers, and we see this a lot when we're doing work with customers, is that the business focuses so much on their product. Internally, they will train for hours on their product. You take the tool company, they spend at least an hour and a half a week training their product. But the reality is the communication with the customer is more important. So the other thing I would suggest an organisation is stop focusing on the product or your service and focus on the outcomes that it delivers. Build your questioning process, your discovery process around good questions. And the last thing I would suggest is don't pitch without permission. Again, it comes back to the fact that we focus so much on products that when we turn up, we're so excited we want to tell the poor prospect everything about it. And what happens is I say you show up and you throw up. You basically pour out all your pieces of information to this poor prospect, and really that's not what they want to hear. They really want to hear what you're going to do to match their need requirements. So stop pitching, stop showing up and throwing up.
Yeah, I think that's 3 brilliant bits of advice. And I, with my, 24 years worth of sales experience and Coke, we're pretty good at getting sales training and probably one of the best sales organisations in the world. And what I realised, when I left, I realised it more, is that sales is as much a science as it is a gift. And I think the people that are naturally good at selling, naturally good at talking, I actually don't think they do anywhere near as well as what they used to. Whereas those that actually, like you said, have the customer's pain points in mind, how they're solving it, really understanding the customer and actually go through a really good process, have a lot more success than in the old days when it was all about talking. That's certainly what I find. Do you find that in the way that sales is trending in the future?
Absolutely. I think traditionally, so going back, say, 20 years, the conversation would probably be 50-50, 50% off the client and 50% from the salesperson. But the reality is, in most cases when I'm selling my own services, I'd be lucky to spend 20% explaining what I do, because the process that you use to unpack their problems, to highlight their issues, to drag out their pain, shows your credibility, shows your ability to do your job. You don't need to go through how clever you are at the end. They've already bought into that process. And one of the things I discover when I go out into most of the clients is that the sales reps don't do that well. They don't drill down and get enough pain. I call it the plummet of pain. And my analogy for that is if you haven't left the goldfish with no water. So let's imagine every time you ask a question, you take a cup of water and take it out of the goldfish bowl. Most sales reps stop while there's still some water for that goldfish. What we do is we help people just continue to dig deeper. And by the time you've solved or brought out that much pain and the goldfish is gagging for water, they're desperate for what you're going to solve. To say to them at that stage, you solve my problems, please. They're looking for their water. Then you only have to say a few things because you've already done your job. And so the transition now, I would say, is 80% of the time customers talking and 20% of the time you should be talking. It should be all about what's in it for them.
Yeah, look, I love that analogy. I've never heard that, the goldfish bowl. I'm going to steal that with pride if that's okay. I love
That's all right. It's very visual.
No.
We can all just imagine that.
Yeah, it's great. Look, I had a client the other day that was really struggling. Like you said, sales is a 4-letter word, and they were very good at what they did, but they just didn't want to sell. I won't go through the whole backstory, but eventually I said, you're a journalist. Think of yourself as a journalist. You're actually trying to ask really good questions to really uncover what their pain is, and then see whether you can provide a solution. So it's not selling. And once I just reframed it for them, they said, oh, okay, well, I can do that because of this particular skill area they're in. So
I like to term that as having a supporter's mindset. So there's 5 sales mindsets that we evidence in the marketplace, 4 of which erode trust and minimise value or the relationship you have with the customer. Only one of those sales mindsets, called the supporter's mindset, will actually take the customer on a buying journey. And that's what we try to do, is instead of trying to sell, get over selling, that's dark ages, we now talk about how we can take the customer through that buying journey more quickly with less objections so that they buy faster. And that's really the process of understanding that pain and unpacking it properly.
Yeah, no, look, brilliant advice. I could spend hours talking to you about this topic. One I'm very, very, not familiar with, or yes, familiar with. But
you are familiar.
Yeah, very passionate about it. And I think for a lot of people that are leaving corporate, our BLG listeners, sales is so critical to the success in your first, for the eternity of your business, but certainly in the first 3 to 5 years.
I always say, if you haven't made a sale, you haven't got a business.
Yeah, and it's you, the owner, right? You can't buy it in. So I think it's so true. And look, the ways that you make revenue in your business at the moment, so how do you make revenue in your business?
So the way that we work with clients, or the way is we work on a project basis. It's normally over 4 months, and we come in and do a deep dive, a gap analysis, to understand where the gaps are. And we look at 7 areas. I won't go into all 7, but probably the most critical is the planning and direction, how the people are aligned, how the process is delivered, and if there's inconsistencies, and where the weaknesses are in the process. There's a layering process that we use when we look at the sales numbers and look at the process, and we can normally find where the weaknesses are from doing that. And then we go about fixing those problems and implementing solutions. So by the end of the 4 months, the sales team have done their training, had their coaching. There's a sales playbook in place. We don't call them KPIs, we call them success measures. And they're up and running, and there's a playbook for onboarding for new people. But the other thing that we do is we provide the last part of the component of what we offer and how we make our revenue is we provide an ongoing 12-month program, which is an online tool that helps the sales managers or the business owners to continue to educate their team. So really it's refresher content on what we've already covered, and there's games and activities to run in the sales meeting. So it's designed to be run once every 2 weeks over the next 20 weeks to ensure that even though we've disappeared, the clients still can embed the process and keep the skills levels where we want them to be.
Great. And if you sort of, take your, I suppose, sales hat off for one moment and sort of look at your business and the way that you have developed your business, what's a key learning that you've got from developing your own business?
Oh, can I be not so nice about this?
Yeah.
To be honest, Paul, what I find is there's a lot of suppliers out there that are just talkers. And they say they're going to do all these things, and I will remain nameless. These people will remain nameless. But I've had lots of promises from suppliers that have promised they're going to shake up my world, and then just haven't delivered. And I find that extraordinarily frustrating. So now, whenever I've just been working for my husband's company, and I've just done this. So now, when I work with all suppliers, I set up a series of KPIs with them to make them accountable as well. It's all easy to fork out money every month for these suppliers, but they actually have to deliver. And so I have learnt, I have been burnt. I have seen nothing for many thousands of dollars over the time. So I've got wise, and now everybody's on a KPI program when they deal with me.
Yeah, look, I think that's really sound advice. And I know as part of our club that runs for the BLG community is actually having some vetted suppliers already, because I've found that's definitely the hardest thing, running your own business versus corporate. Corporate, especially when I worked for Coca-Cola, you really attracted the best suppliers in the world. And yes, you got individuals that weren't great, but the companies were normally fairly good. But I found in small business, it's what people say versus what they do. It can be miles apart. So I think that's a really good learning. And I think if you're just stepping out of corporate, I think really make sure that you're going to a peer group and actually getting people well vetted, and also having what Tanya said, which is some KPIs. Those two things together can certainly help avoid some of those pitfalls that I think, Tanya, you and I have both had in the past.
Yeah, and look, I consider myself a reasonable good judge of character, but if you can get a referral from somebody that's not just somebody that knows somebody, but somebody that's used someone, like yourself, Paul, you've got all the suppliers that you use. You've actually used them. They've proven themselves, so you feel more justified taking that advice. I probably was a bit naive in some of the advice and the referrals I was given in the beginning. So I learnt my lesson the hard way. Cost me some money, but we all have to go through that when we're running our own business, especially in the startup phase. Well, hopefully we can avoid it, but there's always something, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, I think people listening to this will take your advice and certainly lessen that pain. So as far as your current business, other than suppliers, what are some of the biggest challenges you face at the moment in running your own business?
Now, Paul, you know what the answer is for this because you and I talk about this a lot. My biggest problem is scalability. With me, most people are buying me and what I offer, and so sometimes it gets challenging to scale that. So recognising it's a problem and solving it are two different things, especially in the consultancy space. But my recommendation and my learnings from this biggest challenge, and I'm still in the challenge right now, is joint ventures. And I've recognised that there's huge value in bringing additional resources into your world, so as a joint venture, so that you can expand your offering without taking more of your time, because you can easily get burnout otherwise. And look, I have the advantage that I've got a reasonably good close rate with new leads, but sometimes I just don't have the capacity to take people on. And it's a shame to let that go. So scalability is something I'm currently working on, and Paula, you and I are talking about that on a very regular basis. So I think your advice on that's been fantastic, and certainly we'll continue to discuss where we go with that.
Excellent. Yeah, no, here to help. And I think that's the thing for a lot of people that are experts when they leave corporate, like you and I, is exactly what you said. So we've got some good models, and I look forward to working with you closely on that. As far as
I think you guys are pretty good at systemizing things. So you've taught me a few things about getting some more rigor around my systems. And if I was to have my time again, the story I'd like to share with you is that I've just been working on a client that reminded me of my very first client that I mentioned before. And funny, I hadn't looked back on their file for 5 years now. And I looked back and went, wow, I did some really good stuff then. and I've been, in some senses, recreating what I already had because so much time had gone by. So my lesson would have been I should have systemized that program right from the beginning.
Yeah, and look, it's you're an action taker, I know, and lots of people listening to this, you've left corporate because you're an action taker and you actually want to control your destiny, which is perfect. But sometimes we then dismiss some of the greatest strengths of corporate, which is around that systemization. So you just got to get that balance right. And
I'm probably a little over-emphasize systems. So if I do anything once, I build it so that it can either be sellable or someone else can do it. I never do something once off and then quickly run to the next thing. So sometimes I can be a bit slow, but I think getting a combination of great action and that systemization together, I think that's where the real benefit lies.
And I think in the beginning, when you're chasing sales, you're looking for revenue because you need clients. In the beginning, we sometimes lose sight of those fundamentals that corporate do teach us. Just having the due diligence around and the disciplines around your day, even. I think you can easily get sidetracked and burn time and money just by not having that system in your life or the disciplines in your life and working on systemizing your business rather than necessarily, like I encourage you to always go and look out for clients because I think it's highly important, but make sure you're using your downtime effectively as well.
Yeah, I think, and once I was complaining early on to someone that I'm quiet, I haven't got enough work, and I said, actually, that's a good thing because you can actually get your system set up because you'll come to a point where you'll have too much work on, you won't be able to handle it, and that's when most businesses fall over. Either the owner can't stand it anymore and they walk away from the business, or customers say, well, I can't trust this, so I'll go to somebody else. So actually those quiet times are a really good time to build. And when you leave corporate, making sure that you've got a bit of a buffer for that. So, and I think that's where a combination of, your skill set and hopefully mine will be a benefit to some people moving forward.
The other thing I would say around that, and I'm going to contradict myself a little here, is that don't get it all right in the beginning either, because sometimes our perception of what the marketplace wants and what the marketplace actually wants is a little different. So I suggest you do what you can to systemize, but also don't be adapted once you have your clients giving you feedback.
Yeah, no, great point. And I think that's a benefit of some of the software that's out there these days, that it's so flexible you can do that. But in the old days, once you built a system a particular way, that was it. It cost you hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to change it. These days, it's a lot more flexible. So, great point. Now, as far as your partner, Chris, so like you said, he runs a very successful business. If he was listening to this podcast now, how would you like to describe to Chris how he supported you through you running your own business?
Apart from the fact he loves to banter with me and give me a bit of a hard time, so he keeps me with a sense of humour when things are a little bit tough. He was a wonderful support in the beginning because I said to him, we talked about me going back to work, and I said, I can't follow my passion. I can't make a real difference if I've caught in that corporate structure. Are you okay? And I might not make any money in the first 6 months. As it happened, that wasn't a reality. But he said, follow your passion. At the end of the day, if it makes you happy, happy wife, happy life, I think was his cheeky comment. But he supported me all the way. Sometimes it's challenging running two businesses from the same house. We both work from home. And sometimes that can be challenging. We're like ships in the night. But he will always do what it takes to give me a hand. Can I be truly honest? And if he is listening, he probably doesn't know that I know this. He's actually one of my best supporters externally. He's not great at telling me face-to-face, but whenever I meet someone for the first time, they say, oh, your husband raves about how clever you are and what you do around sales growth. He's such a raving fan. So I really appreciate that, even though he doesn't know I know it.
Well, he will now.
Sharing my secrets, Paul.
That's all right. That's what this is all about. As far as you said before, you've got to have the right habits. So in the live section now, I'd just love to, hear about some of the key habits that you use to make you successful.
So my daily disciplines, is that?
Yeah.
Look, I'm a bit anal retentive quietly. I'm one of these people that I must get up every morning and exercise. And Paul, I know you're a little bit like this as well. I need to get that endorphin fix. I need to have my take some time just to reflect and take in the day. I run a very busy life. I have 2 young children as well. So that's my me time, and it's really important. And I find when I don't get that, I'm less effective. The other thing is, again, anal retentive. I write list of things to do every day. And I put what I call a default queue, and I have to be careful when I say that because apparently it comes across a little rude, but it stands for Delivery in Full, On Time to Quality. And it was a term I used when I was working in manufacturing. I was working for a large printing manufacturer, international printing manufacturer here in Australia. I was their national sales manager. And when I first went there and they were talking about this DIFOT, I'm thinking, oh, that seems nuts. But it's a really interesting measure. So with everything on my list of things to do, I put a delivery time. And I measure my own performance. I said I was anal every day based on my DIFOT. So have I delivered everything in full on time as per my schedule? That way I can get more done than anybody else. So yes, I'm an action person, and yes, I output lots, but I have the disciplines around it. So time management is critical.
Great. And actually, Coke used to use DIFOT as well. So,
did they? It works really well for KPIs too.
Yeah, no, but I haven't heard someone use it that way. I think that's a brilliant way of using it. And so the next section is around the give section. And I know you, heavily involved in a cause each week. What is that cause, and what do you do to help that cause?
I'm involved in primary school ethics teaching. So it was really important to me when I've got two young children, and it was important when I went to school that I gave them the best cross-section of learning. And at the time, there was only religious studies. So my children went and did their religious studies, and I was all for that. Then the Primary Education Board supported a ethics program, which is an independent program. And fundamentally, I love this program because it teaches children to think independently. To not think about what their peers think, to actually process the situation and work out how they feel about it and how they're going to react. And with ethics, there's no right or wrong answer. So some of the subjects, which I think sort of clarifies this a little more, that they talk about in this ethics class and I teach, is things like vanity, homelessness, how to vote and how important your vote is. All these subjects that often aren't talked about at home, and often we lead our decision-making based on our parents. We teach these children through a process called an inquiry conversation, where we say, so what if this was the scenario? And then what if we change the scenario and we put this in it? How do you feel now? And we make them actually go through a process to understand the consequence. It's been an amazing process over the last 2 years, being involved in this volunteer group, how much difference I feel I've made to 10-year-old children in primary school. And I hope I've set them up better for life, because that's my purpose in doing it.
Oh, brilliant. That's well done. And do you also think, is that had an impact on your life as well, the way that you've lived your life, given some of the learnings that you've got through this education?
Absolutely. It certainly helps me with my conversations with my children, because I approach it differently. And it's interesting, I adapted. So I've done a lot of facilitation work when we're doing strategic planning and that sort of thing with customers. But I actually now use the technique of an inquiry conversation to try and really drive a different, do we have to always do it this way? What if we change one bit of the scenario? Just try to create that creative thinking inside a work environment. So for what it seemed like I was doing a nice thing to support my school and my children and the greater society, it's actually had quite an impact on the way that I deliver my facilitation with groups and even in training sessions now. So it's been quite fundamental.
Yeah, excellent. That's brilliant. Well, look, the next section and the last section is the action section. So I know you're all about action, as you've described, and I've seen it firsthand with working with you. But what's your number one personal productivity tip for the BLG listeners?
Well, I'd say it was that DIFOT cue. It's certainly something that I use to deliver my life. And the other thing would be, since I'm allowed to, because I've just given myself the second one, is checklists. Create checklists. I have them for my children. It makes them much more productive getting out the door in the morning. And certainly for basic processes, having a checklist is a one-page tool just to keep things on target. So I've got a checklist for everything. So it's a bit scary around here.
I must admit, I'm a bit like that. And as you know, we use a platform called Podio where you can, create checklists for anything, and I'm often using those, for packing for holidays or whatever it is. Just I think the less you can use your in memory, the better we are. Given I saw a stat the other day where I think I can't remember who it was, but he basically said between civilization and 2003, that amount of information we get every week currently. So, it's just a huge amount. So if you can use a checklist just to take the load off the brain, I think that's fantastic. What about apps? What are some of your favourite apps, whether it's on your mobile phone or on your desktop that you use on a regular basis?
My favourite app of all time is one called Unroll.me, and I highly recommend it to anybody. And what it does, so you don't get all that spam. And some things you want to have a look at them, it might be Forbes magazine or something that you want to read later on. What it does is it rolls it all up and bundles it into this thing called Unroll.me. And that means that you don't have to deal with the individual emails. It just collates it all in this one bundle. But the other thing that's wonderful about this app is instead of having to go, if you want to unsubscribe, instead of having to unsubscribe, it has a whole list and it's just one click. So you don't have to go unsubscribe. And the reason you're unsubscribing, 2 or 3 clicks, it all does it in one. So you can basically unsubscribe to 20 things in about half a minute. Now, it's a fantastic time saver. So that's one of my biggest things. Obviously, my calendar would be my other thing. And I just use notes. People tell me lots of interesting things, and I'm one of these people that writes it down and follows it through. And it was interesting, one of the guys I met the other day, we were talking about checklists, and he suggested the Checklist Manifesto is a great book to read. And again, I just captured that in my notes, but I've put a default queue on it to make sure that I action it, and I've now downloaded the book for this weekend. So they're probably the 2 most used time-saving activities. Get it out of my head, get it written down, and I operate faster.
Excellent, brilliant. What about podcasts? Are there any podcasts that you listen to and any that you'd love to recommend to the BLG audience?
Interesting. I don't listen to I have listened to some podcasts in the past. I spend a little less time able to do the listening part of it because of the 2 children or I'm not traveling. But I do, I'm an avid reader and I really enjoy reading. So I enjoy the process of reading as well. So even though I've got my Kindle, I still quite enjoy a book. And one of my favourite books in the selling space that's often not talked about is one called Snap Selling from Jill Conrath. It's a great book because it just it takes the sales process from a different angle, and it's quite refreshing. And my other favourite book, which I use a lot because often this is a bit of a problem with the people I work with, is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. So if you haven't read that book, it's a fable. It's a leadership fable, and it's a great read, and it's got extraordinarily good tools at the back end. So if you've got a team and you're having some struggles with it, read the book, grab the tools, and just use it to build trust within your team.
Brilliant. Well, look, all the links that you've mentioned will certainly be in the show notes, but that's fantastic. I've never heard of Snap Selling or the 5 Dysfunctions, so can't wait to get those myself. Look,
I use Get Abstract a lot, so I just have to get the 10 pages, and then I decide whether I'm going to read the whole book. I don't know if the group uses Get Abstract. It's an app that basically takes a summation of the book, so you'll get a 12-page version of the book, and then you can decide whether you read it, but it's the full version of the book, and it's called Get Abstract. And if you're time short but you want to continue to learn and keep your expertise up, Get Abstract's the quickest way to digest a lot of information.
I think that's great. And also Amazon reviews, I often use that as well to have a quick look, have a skim through the review, and then you can make the choice whether to buy it or not. So great advice. So speaking of advice, what's your sort of parting advice? You've got a very successful business yourself. You're in a lot of businesses you help turn around, and obviously there's Chris and his fantastic business. What's some parting advice you'd love to leave the BLG listeners?
I'm going to leave the BLG listeners with a warning, to be honest. What I found over the last 5 years is there's lots of people that don't value your time. I call them the time stealers, and I don't think they mean any harm by it. I don't think anyone's got a poor intention, but they're the sort of people that steal your time, and time is our most valuable resource. And being a mother of 2 young children, the major caregiver and helping my husband's business plus running my own, time is my most valuable asset. So I've got very good to avoid the time stealers, because they're the ones that are looking for a lot of free advice. They just ring you up for a chat and they just literally steal your time away. Now, again, I don't believe their intention is bad, but now I can spot them a mile off, and then I just make sure I keep it nice and short. So that would be my one piece of advice. Value yourself and your time over and above everything else, particularly in the beginning.
Yeah, and look, that's great advice. And I know Warren Buffett's always quoted to say that, time is the most valuable asset that you have, so use it wisely. So I think that is spot on. What about...
It's the most valuable, and it's the one we give away most freely.
Yeah, great build. What about people finding out more about you? How can they find more about you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, one of my favourite resources, and actually where I get quite a lot of my business from. And it's Tanya Gray, TanyagRay. Or you can find me at bebusiness.com.au. That's bebusiness.com.au. But I'm also, if you want to find out a little bit more about the process that we go to improve the sales team's performance and really get them to shine, as I like to say, please download the book, Setting Your Sales Team Up for Success, Sales Teams That Shine, as my first book. And I will send not only that book, but it's also a copy of my second book, which is a collaboration book, complimentary to you. So feel free to click on the link below.
Oh, brilliant. Excellent. And really appreciate doing that. And I think, Tanya, there's a lot of people out in your profession, if I say around sales training and sales coaching, that don't deliver, but I've certainly I know you've worked with some of my clients and delivered, and I know that you're going to deliver some great value into our Build to Give community. So as you said, sales is really everything as you run your own small business. So we really appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom around sales today, or certainly not all, but a great part of your wisdom today, and also giving some great resources where people can find out more. So we love having you in the community. I personally love working with you, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Paul. It's been great. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Tanya. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give show. If you found this show helpful, please share it with others so we can build businesses, live great lives, and give back to the community. If you would like to join the BLG community, go to our website, www.buildlivegive.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.